Hot topic here on Morning Kick-Around's May 19th episode. Prior to their 13th winless game of the season, the Los Angeles Galaxy extended the contract of head coach Greg Vanney. Two-parter here. Was this a good idea to extend a contract to the coach? I mean, granted, reigning winner, but also winless through 13. And what does that say about Major League Soccer to where they extend the contracts of a manager who hasn't won in 13 games?
Yeah, it was a draw against LAFC. Marco Reus scored twice in that game, but obviously they didn't win, and they still haven't won in 2025. And the longer they go without winning, the smaller their chances of making the playoffs and having an opportunity to defend their title. However, that's not impossible, right, Rob? Like there is still a chance that they could find a way back into the playoff picture in the Western Conference. If this was a team in almost any other league in the world, and
the season's already over.
We'll say, in Mexico, it could happen, I suppose. And there are some other leagues where it's not necessarily the end if you are, this bad through 13 games. But most leagues,
14 games, excuse me. It's 14.
Sorry, 14 games. Most leagues, after 14 games without a win, your season is over, right? We're talking Southampton levels of ineptitude, right? Which means what happened? What happened to Southampton?
They went down the earliest that any team's ever gone down.
They went down, down, down into the burning ring of fire is what they did. And again, priority commenting, Mike Thomas, a member of the MK Ultras, most leagues, regardless of sport, actually makes a good point, right? If you go winless, and even in baseball, which has 162 games, if you go winless through 14 games, you're in big trouble as a manager, right? Now, it depends on what your expectations are coming to the year. Like that's the balance, right? Like what were your expectations when we started the season and you lost 14 games straight? You got to go. Or not lost in baseball would be 14 losses. In soccer, obviously, they have some points, just not a lot, and no wins. Man, look, there is a rational part of my brain that says, I get it, Rob. He won a championship last year. He won a title. He managed to win a title despite his best player going down in the semifinals. He took a team that, was kind of in a rebuilding moment in a league where there were better teams over the course of the regular season. Miami, Columbus. I mean, you look at the standings last year. It's not as though the LA Galaxy had everything going for them going into the playoffs, right? It's not as though we're talking about a sort of an unstoppable team and all Greg Vanney did was sort of make sure they didn't get in their own way. Now, they did finish, they finished near the top of the table, right? They did finish tied on points with LAFC, right? What came down to the final day, I think they dropped points in Houston, right? Did the Galaxy? I'm trying to remember the sequence of events, but they end up finishing second to LAFC, but they still win the title. I mean, I guess what I'm saying is, how much credit does he get for last year when you're looking at his contract this year with 13 games at the time of the announcement without a victory? And is it bad for MLS that Greg Vanney gets extended? Is it a bad look for MLS that Greg Vanney gets extended when his team looks like this?
I think that if someone overseas saw the headline that coach winless after 13 games gets, an endorsement, essentially, I'm sure folks could definitely roll their eyes and say only in Major League Soccer. And granted, there's caveat city, like you said. You just went through, reigning champions and this and that.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
what did Claudio Ranieri, example, Leicester City, brought them unprecedented success halfway through, maybe 2/3 of the way through their second, his follow-up season. He was like, I didn't agree with it, but the pressure is such.
Well, okay. But that's the thing. Like one of the elements here, like one of the variables. So I also thought about Marcelo Bielsa. Marcelo Bielsa got fired at Leeds despite doing what nobody had done in 2 decades, which is get Leeds back to the Premier League, right? They still fired him. Now, he's a difficult kind of person to deal with, so maybe he just wore out his welcome as much as it was, hey, the results aren't good, Marcelo. muchas gracias. We're going to move on. Sometimes those clubs are poorly run, or the decision to fire a manager is on a hair trigger when it shouldn't be, right? And those clubs might benefit from holding on rather than letting go at the first sign of trouble. It's really hard to know when it is we should fire our manager and we shouldn't fire our manager. Nobody knows for sure. There's no perfect formula here. And while we do have people saying this is a bad look, failing upward, Major League, it doesn't look good for MLS, and that sort of proposed that idea. I'm sure there are coaches on both sides of the Atlantic Ocean who would tell you, Rob, managers get fired too quickly. Right? It's not always, and we even live in this world now where it's possible to separate the results, the success of a club from the manager in many cases. Like, it's not that they're doing it in spite of the manager, but the manager is only one small element in how good a team is. And there aren't a lot of managers who make an actual difference in the success of their teams, right? And it's even hard to say for sure that Pep Guardiola is the reason Manchester City has racked up all these trophies. Because what has City done more than anybody else in their league, or anybody else in Europe for that matter? They spent money on really good players, right? There's no way to separate Pep Guardiola from the most expensive team ever put together when you talk about City's results. So when you talk about Greg Vanney on the other side of this, in a league that is, again, all about parity, all about budgeting, there is so much of this idea of, well, they're being restricted in what they can spend. Did the Galaxy make mistakes? Sure. And I know Will Kuntz has been out in the media talking about this recently. Like, that's how bad things are. They've got their general manager doing a media tour, talking to people like the Cooligans about what's going on in Los Angeles. They clearly don't see the struggles this year as Greg Vanney's fault.
So to kind of put this as a bow, so in Major League Soccer, can you take a year off? Does one bad year even matter? Can you just skip till next year in Major League Soccer?
Yeah, well, okay. Again, the other side of the coin is, would they be better with somebody else in charge? And I think they've got a guy who has MLS Cup trophies in two different places.
Yeah.
Right. They've got a guy who has ties to the club he is managing, which I think that sentimentality is an element for the fan base. If they fired him, who could they get that would be better? Because if you don't have an alternative, Rob, if you don't have somebody who's going to make you better, why fire the guy? Now, there's a difference between firing a guy and giving him an extension, or not firing him and giving him an extension. That's obviously the next level. Like, this isn't just, we didn't fire him after 14 games without a win. We gave him an extension. We really are putting our eggs in his particular basket. And man, that's the part that's hard to sell. And again, I think only in relief against what happens in some other leagues do we see this as rewarding failure. When again, in Major League Soccer, it's just a very different kind of dynamic. Right? It's just a different structure that probably tells the Galaxy and Will Kuntz, we can't do better than Greg Vanney. He won us a trophy. He'll get us back there once we get him the kind of players he needs to win. And, Ricky Puig being absent is a major part of this story.
Yeah, it certainly is. Yeah. But I mean, he's been given every caveat there is. So it's maybe a good and bad. Very rarely are things absolutely one or the other. Maybe they got that contract extension because the players, maybe they're like, oh, after this amount of a stretch, there's no way my coach is staying there. But then you give them an extension, and that gives them the solidity. Like, I have to prove myself still to this coach, and we're not playing for his job. Maybe that takes some pressure off too on the other sides. Like, if we screw this up, we're going to lose our boss. But if he has an extension, maybe that gives him confidence that there's still belief there. And that maybe take the little bit of a weight off that any loss could mean the loss of a job.
I'm sure, yeah, you can frame it that way. We know Ricky Puig is a big backer of Greg Vanney, has done so on social media. He's probably thrilled about this. Again, Mike Thomas threw up a comment that said it's less about who's better in terms of replacing him and more a symbolic way of showing the fans you aren't content with your current situation. But that is the tail wagging the dog, right? That is, and I'm not saying it's wrong in every case to defy the fan base or to not care what the fan base thinks in terms of the perceptions of what you're doing. And again, this is something that gets leveled at Major League Soccer clubs on the regular because of the lack of relegation. It's this idea that they accept mediocrity. They don't care. There's no pressure. Now, look, as somebody who's been watching this league for 20 years now and has covered this league for that long, I can tell you the pressure is much more intense now than it's ever been. Does that mean it's where we want it to be, or it's like maxed out in a good way? Probably not. But it was easier for managers to keep their jobs with bad runs or to get extensions or whatever 10 years ago than it is now. Managers get fired now in MLS in a way they didn't get fired before. If you want it to be like Liga MX, I don't know that that's a good thing. If you want it to be more like England in the Championship and Premier League, okay, maybe that's the balance that we want, right? Maybe we do want our teams to say, this is not acceptable. We have to fire a manager to make a point as much as it is we think we'll get better on the other side.
A final point on this topic. The LA Galaxy are 14 points off of the last playoff spot in the West. Right. Can they do it with 50 to 60% of the season to go?
If you're going to ask me what the problem is with Major League Soccer in terms of the pressure or the way that clubs are, that safety net, the playoff safety net is the problem. It's not the lack of relegation. Is that 9 teams can make the postseason and 9 teams can say, oh, we did okay. And then 9 teams can justify keeping somebody who maybe didn't meet expectations. And as Pamit says, it's not just about losing or a poor start. It's about a record-setting poor start, right? This is sort of like, this isn't just, oh, this is not what we expected from the Galaxy. This is, oh my God, this is so bad that they are now setting records. And I can see that. I can see that as frustrating for Galaxy fans. It took a long time for them to make the changes in the front office that the fans were demanding, right? They remember they had some issues. They got punished by Major League Soccer for breaking some rules. And eventually Peter Vagenas and Chris Klein and Jovan Karofsky all got ousted. And then they won a championship. And I guess even despite that championship, they don't have enough credit with their fans that the fans can just accept that this is the way things are. And Greg Vanney's still our guy.
Let's keep the conversation going about Greg Vanney getting a contract extension after a record-setting bad start to a year. Keep that going in the comments beyond the live show. And, like we like to do, good, compelling conversation or questions we will bring up in future episodes, perhaps. You can assist in the growth of Morning Kick Around. Hit that subscribe button. Doesn't cost you a thing. And it helps out what we're doing here tremendously. And if you want to crank it up a notch, $3.99 a month is all it costs to become a member. You gain access to the Discord, early access to videos, bonus content, priority commenting, and much, much more. Become a member of the MK Ultra membership group with just a simple click of the button. You can find us on social media at MKickaround on X, Instagram, and Blue Sky. Write us a note, morningkickaround@gmail.com, and search Morning Kick Around on your favorite audio platform to take us along with you as a podcast. And if you'd like to support outside of the YouTube platform, coffee.com/morningkickaround, and you can do a one-time or a customizable contribution over there on Coffee. Thanks to everyone who has supported and those going to support here right after viewing this show.